All right. Hello and good day, everyone. Welcome to today's micro teaching session. I am Dominic Tambong, and I'll be the leader of this group. And today we will be talking about uh, subtopics of the digestive system, which will be nutrition and metabolism. Okay, next page. We will begin with 8 subtopics under nutrition and metabolism, and we should start with nutrients. Okay. So, nutrients are the chemicals used by the body: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and water. Under these, we have the essential nutrients, which must be ingested because the body either cannot manufacture them at all or cannot manufacture them in adequate amounts. So, these kind of nutrients are important since we cannot produce them. These nutrients are found in food or other consumable products. Okay, next. Miss Garmino, would you like to read this part?
So nutrients, carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins are the major organic nutrients. They must be broken down by enzymes into their components during digestion before they can be absorbed by organs and intestines. Many of these nutrients are broken down further by body cells to supply energy, whereas others are used by the cells as building blocks for new carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins.
Okay, thank you, Miss Garmino. Next slide. Vitamins are minerals are required in only small amounts. Vitamins, minerals, and water are absorbed by the digestive tract without being digested. The essential nutrients include certain amino acids and fatty acids, most vitamins, minerals, water, and a few carbohydrates. And next slide, please. In this diagram, we can see the major and minor nutrients. You can see the differences where in the major, such as fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, build tissue and provide energy. And for the minor nutrients, like minerals, vitamins, and water, helps your body run smoothly. All right. Mr. Eddie Marcacho, I have a question for you. Which nutrient is considered the most important for human function?
So, in my opinion, the most important nutrient for human function is water. Because a person can only survive a few days without consuming water, even slight dehydration can cause headaches and impaired physical and mental functioning. The human body is made up of mostly water and every cell requires water to function.
Okay, Mr. Cacho, thank you for your answer. Right, next slide. So, dietary recommendations. There are several types of food guide development in order to provide dietary recommendations. So, dietary recommendations are important to know because we need a balanced diet in order for the human body to function properly and lead a healthy life. Um, Miss Alvarado, would you like to read this part?
Yes. Um, there are several types of food guide developed in order to provide dietary recommendations. First is Healthy Eating Food Pyramid. Formulated by Walter Willett in 1992, it uses the horizontal orientation of the food group, emphasizing eating whole grain foods, lots of fruits and vegetables, substituting plant oil for animal fats, and restricting red meat, sweet, and starchy foods.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So this is the food pyramid. If you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is also similar to this. From the top corner, we have foods that are high in fat and sugar and salt, and at the bottom, which are vegetables and fruits. It is important to know at the top, these are products we should consume less, and at the bottom of the pyramid, these are food products which must be consumed much more in our daily life serving. Um, Miss Resurrection, considering canned foods contain preservatives, where would you consider their placement in this food pyramid?
I think canned goods belong to the top or the peak of the pyramid, since the foods that belong to that placement or should only be consumed sparingly or not every day, since these foods have a lot of preservatives that may be harmful to our health.
Thank you. All right, next slide, please. The next dietary guide is the My Plate. It's a food guide that helps us to know the proper amount of certain food that we should ingest. It serves as a reminder about the appropriate serving sizes. Its main purpose is for us to have a healthy diet and also to reduce the risk of weight-related diseases. Okay, next will be a diagram. Next slide, please. As you can see, the My Plate is shaped like a pie chart. Like, for example, 20% is for grains, 30% are for vegetables, 30% are for fruits, and 20% are protein-rich foods, which contributes to a 100%, which means this means a healthy, proper human diet. Uh, uh, Miss Miss Malilay, I have a question for you.
Yes po.
Um, which would you consider a better dietary food guide? The My Plate guide or the Food Pyramid guide?
Um, I think po both of them have their own strengths, but if I have to give an answer po, I think I would choose the My Plate guide, since it has a designated food proportion and it is controllable. And personally po, the My Plate guide is more on a personal level, and the food pyramid guide is on the general part. And I have read somewhere that you can personalize your own My Plate in a website, and you just have to input your age, gender, your weight, height, and the amount of physical activity that you do po in a day.
Thank you for your answer. All right, next slide, please. So we now is the five basic food groups. Mr. Cacho, would you like to read this part?
The basic food groups provide the nutrients essential for life and growth. These foods are also known as everyday foods. Each of the food groups provides a range of nutrients and all have a role in helping the body function.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So, in each food group, there are major nutrients supplied in significant amounts by all in these groups, which means every food group has these kind of major nutrients inside them. Depending on each group, there may be similarities, but mostly there are differences in each food group. Ms. Melgarejo, would you like to read each of the nutrients in each of the food group?
Okay. Um, for fruits, we have carbohydrate water. Vegetables, also carbohydrate water. For grain products, we have carbohydrate protein, thiamine B1, and niacin.
milk products, we have protein, fat, riboflavin, B12, calcium, phosphorus, and water. And for meat and meat alternatives, we have protein, niacin, B6, iron, and zinc.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Also, we have major nutrients supplied in significant amounts by only some groups, which means there are only specific specific types of food groups which contains these kinds of major nutrients, which means not ev- in each group, not all have these major nutrients that are stored within them. Uh, Miss Jasmine, would you like to read read these major nutrients?
The major nutrients supplied in significant amounts of fruits, we have vitamins A, C, folic acid, and the minerals, we have iron, potassium, and fiber. While for vegetables, we have vitamins A, C, E, K, and B, and vitamins except B12. For the minerals, we have calcium, magnesium, iodine, manganese, phosphorus, and phosphorus fiber. While for grain products, we have water fiber, and its minerals are iron, magnesium, and selenium. While for milk products, we have carbohydrates, and its vitamins are A and D. While for meat and meat alternatives, they have carbohydrates, fat, B12, B1, water, and fiber.
Thank you. So it is very important to know that each food group has its own major nutrients stored inside them, which is why this is also connected with our dietary guide. Each guides provide a perfect balance of what food group to eat in order for us to have a productive and healthy life. Thank you. Next slide. Before that, Miss Garmino, um, which food group should be consumed the most in each meal?
Thank you for the question. So, to answer your question, average person should consume the highest proportion of food from the vegetables and fruits. This is due to the fact that these two groups have higher sources of vitamins and minerals, an excellent source of dietary fiber. Additionally, these two groups will reduce the risk of bowel cancer, prevent constipation and digestion problems. However, one must consume also the same proportion from the grain food. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mina. All right, next slide, please. Next topic would be metabolism. I know we are all familiar with this with our last lesson, but let us further expand on this. Metabolism is a sum of all chemical reactions that are involved in catabolism and anabolism, which means catabolism and anabolism are under the metabolism guide. The reaction governing the breakdown of food to obtain energy are called catabolic reactions. Anabolic reactions use the energy produced by catabolic reactions to synthesize larger molecules from smaller ones. So to differentiate them, catabolic reactions break down food into energy, while anabolic reactions uh, synthesize into from smaller molecules into larger molecules. Okay, next slide, please. Miss Malilay, would you like to read this part?
Metabolism varies depending on age, gender, activity level, fuel consumption, and lean body mass. Aging is known to decrease the metabolic rate by as much as 5% per year. Additionally, because men tend to have more lean muscle than women, their basal metabolic rate at rest is higher. Therefore, men tend to burn more calories than women do.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. All right. Who would like to further elaborate in the catabolic reaction? Okay, Mr. Delacruz, would you please further elaborate?
The breakdown of carbs is that release energy and contain chemical bonds. So yung catabolism or the reaction, yung large molecule natin convert siya sa smaller molecule to be used as energy. So yung conversions na to or yung energy, kapag yung convert, it is not 100% efficient. Therefore, 40% of energy that is produced or na nagawa doon sa catabolic reaction is directly transferred by high energy, which is known as our energy or the adenosine triphosphate or the
Okay. Next slide, please. All right. So ATP, the energy current to the cells, can be used immediately to power molecule machines that support cell, tissue, and organ function. The remaining 60% of the energy released from catabolic reaction is given up as heat, which tissues and body fluids absorb. Anyone would like to also further expound this part? Okay, again. Yes, Mr. Delacruz.
our energy na produce sa catabolic. So going back to our module 1, physiology, there's the structural and functional organization of the human body that starts with the chemical reaction, which is RA, then until the organism level, which is us. So we will receive to the cell, it will start with the cell, to our organ, then to our organ system, and then our body. So the remaining of the 60% of the energy that is produced from the catabolic reaction is given off as heat. So that's why mainit ang ating katawan and body fluids natin inside our body also.
Thank you for your answer, Mr. Delacruz. I highly appreciate it. All right, next slide. The energy from ATP drives all bodily functions such as contracting muscles, maintaining the electrical potential of nerve cells, and absorbing food in gastrointestinal tract. So which means ATP is a very important enzyme that is used in our it is very important for our daily bodily function, and without it, we cannot fully use our motor functions and other internal and cannot function from our internal body organs. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so anabolic reactions. This involves joining of smaller molecules into larger ones. These processes require energy in the form of ATP molecules generated by catabolic reactions. Anabolic reactions, also called biosynthesis reactions, create new molecules that form new cells and tissues and revitalize organs. So, in order for our body to create new cells or for new cells to grow in development, anabolic reaction is an important step in it. It also requires ATP, which were generated from the catabolic reactions. Okay, next slide. Oh yeah, since Mr. Delacruz have been answering most of the expounding the metabolic rates, I have a question for you. Does metabolism differ from person to person?
The metabolism rate varies from person to person because of our different age, order, or in body mass, fuel consumption. Therefore, our metabolism varies. Kaya nga di ba, then, may kasabi, Yung sinasabi tayo na kapag mabilis ang ating metabolism, mabilis rin tayong yan. Pero there are people din also na mahina ang metabolism, kaya madali sila.
Also, one more. What would happen if our metabolic rate slows down?
So the only reason that or one reason that our metabolic rate slows down is because of aging. And also, because of aging, our body function slows down also. Therefore, we don't have that much of muscle mass or functions that really requires energy. Therefore, our metabolic rate also brings us time.
Okay. Thank you, Delacruz, for your time. And let us proceed to the next topic, which will be protein metabolism. It is a chemical cycle of breaking down protein and using the components to synthesize new molecules to be used in the body. The digestion of proteins begins in the stomach, where the hormone pepsin is secreted by the stomach. All right, next slide, please. The liver is the heart of protein metabolism. It has both anabolic and catabolic functions. In the liver, amino acids are synthesized into larger proteins that circulate through the body, performing a huge variety of tasks, including stimulating production of other proteins. So, who would like to expound why does the liver is an important part of the protein metabolism? Um, Anyone? What about Miss Melgarejo?
Yes, I would like to further expound regarding about protein metabolism. So basically, protein metabolism is the breakdown of large polypeptide chains to unleash free essential and non-essential amino acids. And these amino acids provide cells with the needed substrates for protein synthesis or energy creation.
Thank you. Next slide, please. The liver also breaks down proteins, for example, hemoglobin found in red blood cells, and the liver cleanses the blood by removing cellular debris and processing excess nitrogen that is produced by chemical reactions within cells. So, yes, the liver is a very important part of protein metabolism and is essential also in cleansing blood and also breaks down proteins such as hemoglobin. All right, next. Okay, before we start, since Miss Margot was expounded the protein metabolism, I have a question for you. Um, are there any factors that affect protein metabolism?
Well, protein metabolism is affected by the overall body condition. It can depend on genetics, nitrogen balance, training volume, and your hormone levels.
Okay, and what happens when the liver stops protein metabolism?
Well, as stated earlier, liver is at the heart of protein metabolism. If it stops, then it can cause liver damage or liver failure, and it can eventually lead to rapid death.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next topic, which is fat or lipid metabolism. Lipid metabolism is associated with carbohydrate metabolism as products of glucose can be converted into lipids. Fats or lipids in the body are ingested as food by adipocytes or hepatocytes. Lipid metabolism entails the oxidation of fatty acids to either generate or synthesize new lipids. So, in order for us to create new fats or lipids within our body, lipid metabolism is an important step in that process. Okay, next. So, would you like to read this, Miss Malilay? Would you like to read this part?
Okay, the lipid metabolism begins in the intestine where ingested triglycerides are broken down into smaller chain fatty acids and subsequently into monoglyceride molecules by pancreatic lipase, enzymes that break down after they are emulsified by biosalts. Cholecysto cholecystokinin or CCK, a digestive hormone that stimulates the release of pancreatic lipase from the pancreas and stimulates the contraction of the gallbladder to release stored bile salts into the intestine.
Okay, thank you. So, metabolism starts at the intestines where our triglycerides are then broken by pancreatic lipase, which turns into monoglyceride molecules. Along this, a digestive hormone known as cholecystokinin is stimulated to release pancreatic lipase from the pancreas and stimulate the contraction of the gallbladder to release stored bile salts. Both of these stored bile salts and pancreatic lipase are important in the next step of fat or lipid metabolism. Next slide. Ms. Garmino, would you like to read this?
So fat lipid metabolism. Together with pancreatic lipases and bile salts break down triglycerides into free fatty acids. These fatty acids are congested across the intestinal membrane. Within the intestinal, these triglycerides are packaged along with cholesterol molecules in phospholipid vesicles called chi- chylom- what? Chylomicrons. Chylomicrons enable fat and cholesterol within the aqueous environment of your lymphatic circulatory system.
Okay, thank you. So once the triglycerides are in the intestinal tract, they're broken into free fatty acids. These fatty acids are transported into our intestinal membrane, which will be packaged along a phospholipid known as chylomicrons. These chylomicrons enables the fat and cholesterol to move to our lymphatic and circulatory systems. Next slide. So once the chylomicrons leave the enterocytes by exocytosis and enter the lymphatic system via lacteals, from the lymphatic system, the chylomicrons are transported into the circulatory system. Once in circulation, they can either go to the liver or be stored in the fat cells, adipocytes, that compose adipose or fat tissue throughout the body. So after that, the chylomicrons are and then spread into our lymphatic system, which our lymphatic system then spreads it into our circulatory system. So once they are in circulation in our circulatory system, they will now either be in the liver or be stored in fat cells that are fat cells or adipocytes, which entails the which entails the ending of our fat lipid metabolism. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. And the last topic we'll be discussing will be the carbohydrates metabolism. Carbohydrates are broken down into simple, soluble sugar that can be transported across the intestinal wall into the circulatory system to be transported throughout the body. Okay, next slide. Miss Malilay, would you like to would you like to read this part?
Okay po. Carbohydrate digestion begins in the mouth wherein salivary glands release salivary amylase, which is an enzyme that starts breaking down starch molecules and continues in small intestines. Simple sugars are then absorbed through the intestinal wall and transported into the bloodstream to tissues for consumption or storage.
Okay, thank you. Next slide. So, Mr. Resurreccion, would you continue this part?
So once the absorbed monosaccharides are transported to the tissues, the process of cellular respiration begins. Then the body cells uses carbohydrates as their preferred fuel to produce cellular energy or ATP.
Thank you. Next. Right. Next are the glucose and glycolysis. Glucose, also known as blood sugar, is the major breakdown product of carbohydrate digestion. Cells store energy in the form of glucose, which they can catabolize when they need it. Glycolysis is a process where the monosaccharide glucose is oxidized, releasing the energy stored in bonds to produce ATP. Next. All right. So, who would you like to elaborate the glycogenesis?
Micca,
Okay, Miss Alvarado.
to elaborate, in our liver and muscles, the glucose is most glucose is converted into glycogen if we don't need it for storage. That process is called glycogenesis. So if our glucose is are low, the glycogen in our liver and muscle will be converted back to glucose for for use. Um, that's all.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So, who would like to also further elaborate this diagram? Okay, Mr. De La Cruz.
Glucose is needed upon entering the cell to supply energy. It begins with the metabolic process, which is called the glycolysis. So yung result ng glycolysis or yung end product is pyruvates. To give an overview of glycolysis, so during the energy consuming phase of glycolysis, yung dalawa na yun na ATP is consumed. So, therefore, yung dalawa na yun will be transferred into phosphate to the glucose molecule. So, yung molecules naman na yun, mag-split siya into 3 carbon compounds. So, which contains phosphate na being transferred nga sa glucose. So, during the second phase of the glycolysis, an additional phosphate is added each the 3 carbon compounds. So, the energy is under Johnson reaction that is provided by the removal of the 2 electrons, which is called as the oxidation process. So, doon siya nangyari sa 3 carbon compounds. So, during the energy releasing phase, or the ending phase of the glycolysis, the phosphates are removed from the 3 carbon compounds and it is used to produce 4 ATP molecules. So, from the 2 ATP molecules, it will be 4 ATP molecules.
Thank you for your elaboration, Mr. De La Cruz. And next slide, please. The Krebs cycle. Is there anyone who would like to also expound the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle?
So, ulit.
Okay, Mr. De La Cruz.
So, since glycolysis releases relatively little ATP or yung apat na yon, so it will undergo under further reactions to continue to convert the pyruvic acid to acetyl-CoA. So then the citric acid in the citric acid cycle, which is known as the Krebs cycle. So to give an overview again, so during the Krebs cycle, so each of the pyruvate that is generated by the glycolysis is converted into carbon, which is what we know the acetyl-CoA. So yung acetyl-CoA na to is masynthesize siya or
will be processed through the cycle of Krebs cycle, and which will produce a high energy molecule, which is the NADH, the IDH, and the more ATP molecule.
Thank you again, Mr. Delacruz. Right? Last slide. All right. Who would like to lastly expound on this final diagram?
I want to try again. So,
Okay.
okay. So during strenuous muscular activity, for example, when we are jogging or exercising, the pyruvate in our body will be converted into lactic acid. And when we are resting period, just like when we are just sitting, that lactic acid will be converted back into pyruvic acid, and that pyruvic acid will be converted back again to glucose. And that process is called gluconeogenesis or anabolism. And to summarize it all, in glycolysis, the products are pyruvic acid and ATP. So in the synthesis of ATP, in the first synthesis of ATP, it only releases little ATP. So the further reaction will continue to convert pyruvic acid to acetyl coenzyme A, and then in the citric acid and in the citric acid cycle, which is elaborated by Keith earlier. So the majority of ATP is synthesized in the citric acid cycle, and I think that's
Thank you, Ms. Alvarado. So because of that, I also have questions for you. So
yes.
how can carbohydrates metabolize?
Once we intake food which contain carbohydrates, the our body releases enzymes like salivary amylase, which is responsible for breaking down larger carbohydrate molecules into smaller ones.
Okay, last question. Are there any disorders that can be contributed to carbohydrate metabolism?
Yes, there are, and there are diseases that is associated with carbohydrate metabolism, and for example, is hypoglycemia. It is not a disease but can indicate health problems, and it happens when uh, there is not enough glucose or sugar in our blood, which may result to diabetes type 1 and type 2 diabetes in particular. So, in additional, if if we want to bring our blood sugar levels back to normal, we should take insulin. So, because insulin is one of the key hormones of our carbohydrate metabolism.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Alvarado. Well, I think that's it. And we are finally ending all the subtopics of metabolism and nutrients. I am very happy for our engaging micro teaching session. I hope everyone has absorbed the knowledge that have been shared to our colleagues, and I am very happy that we were able to answer my follow-up questions regarding the subtopics. All right? Thank you, and you are now dismissed.